Let me start with you, Mona. Given that, at World Bank you see across countries, is there a nation at this point of time that will be in a position to benefit from the latest trade chaos as we go on?
Thank you very much, and really happy to be here today. Africa is a big priority for the World Bank, and we really are putting a lot of effort and investment and support to see Africa grow in the future, and this is really the African decade. From a trade perspective, given where we're at today, I can tell you we have seen no country that has been able to grow and reduce poverty globally without trade. So trade should be at the heart of a development strategy for Africa. And Africa hasn't done very well on trade. Everybody knows its trade to GDP is not very high, and its trade is not very diversified. Mainly it exports minerals and oil. But today there are new opportunities, and the opportunities come in different forms for Africa. There are opportunities coming from the Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement. If it's implemented well, and if it's complemented by reforms that are needed on the transport side, on the energy side, on the investment climate side, then it can really lead to change in Africa. There's also the critical minerals, which are needed for the production of strategic products, like the strategic products for the green transition of the future, like electric vehicles and batteries and so on. And many of those critical minerals are actually in Africa, and African leaders are saying very clearly, we don't want to export minerals, we want to create value addition in the country, so that offers more opportunities. And then there's the digital transformation. Of course, there's also a risk of digital divide, but the countries in Africa that have been able to leverage the digital transformation, and that includes Nigeria, Ghana, Kenya, South Africa, Morocco. So all these countries are doing very well on digital trade and can do a lot more moving forward. If you ask me which country is going to benefit from all this, there is such variety in Africa that not all countries will benefit at the same time, but there are certainly key countries that can perhaps bring the others together. South Africa and Morocco both have good industrial base. They already produce automotives, and now they can switch to electric vehicles and battery production with the critical minerals around them, creating regional value chains that benefit them and the others around them. So these are countries with great potential. Of course, on digital, I already mentioned which ones as well have potential. So I think there will be enough of those rising stars to bring all of Africa together with them.
Thank you, Mona. I think we'll be actually talking about all the aspects that you just discussed as we go along. But let me bring in Abir right now. I mean, we're talking about trade. Logistics is obviously very important to that. So what are you seeing? Have you seen any impact on this trade chaos on logistics, for instance?
Well, I think that we need to realize that what we're going through right now is a kind of entire systemic change. Across the world, we're seeing more and more protectionism, and we're seeing more and more uncertainty. So I do agree with what Mona said, that this is the African decade. There are so many opportunities, but the real challenge where transport and logistics is concerned is the cost aspect for Africa, and how Africa can become more competitive in the world. The only way to do that is to add more value creation, as you mentioned, rather than just exporting resources. And the only way for that to happen is for it to be integrated with complete logistics systems. So I think there's a huge amount of potential. I've seen several projects happening across the continent that are improving efficiency, improving the time for trade, but so much more needs to be done. We need to be working on unifying and standardizing across the whole AFCFTA area. We need to work on logistics infrastructure from rail to roads to the maritime and port community systems, cold chain storage. And we need to be working on the digital aspect of logistics, whether that's IoT, AI routing, blockchain to organize the supply chain, freight matching platforms. There's a lot of potential, but the challenge as I see it, and that I think maybe Mona and Banji can really address, is the finance.
Exactly. That was my next question, going to be to Banji on finance. And both of you talked about Africa's decade. And Banji had said that Africa is not an aid case, it's an investment case. Now, given the current financial situations, how do we make a case for sustained investment in African trade infrastructure, Banji?
Yeah, thank you. I truly said Africa is not an aid case, an investment case. But somehow I got into trouble in my family for making such a public statement in Davos, because my brother actually works, interestingly, in the NGO, the aid, quote and unquote industry, and he was like, "Hey, wait a minute, you want to get me sacked for making that statement?" So my mom had to intervene in order to make it. That part is a joke. The mom part is a joke, but. It's a statement I made, and I truly believe in it, because I think when we look at Africa, then we begin to ask ourselves, what comparative advantages does the continent have? Some of them you've talked about. Let's start from the basics. Location. The location is great, relative to other continents, generally not too far on either side. So I think that's a plus. Number two, let's talk about the population, which we call the demographic dividend, which could also be a demographic cost if we don't do some of the right things. 1.5 billion people growing at 2.5% per annum. By 2050, 30% of the world will be African, about 2.5 billion people. And more importantly, the median age of that continent is 19. It's 19 years old. So if you think about when the rest of the world is aging, Africa is actually getting younger and younger. That, to me, is an investment case. It's certainly not an aid case. So we need to start thinking about what are these comparative advantages that we have. 55% of the world's cobalt is in Africa. 85% of manganese of reserves of the world is in Africa. You need all this for the energy transition. You need all these things to power the next phase of growth of the entire world. That, to me, cannot be, an aid case. That sounds to me like an investment case. And I think all those things are there. Those are opportunities. It's a decade for Africa, I agree. But we need to convert all those opportunities into bankable projects. And to make them become bankable projects, that's where people like AFC get involved, where we do the heavy lifting, trying to, structure those projects. Then the finance will come, which is the point you're making about the finance. Because I strongly believe that there's finance. Africa alone has about $3 to $4 trillion of institutional capital. That's between asset managers, insurers, central bank reserves, etc. That domestic capital alone can power the next phase of growth of the continent. So I think, broadly speaking, we need to get to the basics, sell the continent as an investment case. Secondly, all the investment projects that we have, make them structured and make them bankable, put in the capital that we need to de-risk those projects, and institutions like ours have a lot of role to play in that. And after we've done that, charity begins at home, get domestic capital to invest in those projects, then external capital begins to follow. So just broadly speaking, I think I'll just stop there, but I think that's high level the way I see the terrain at the moment.
So I'll come back to the financing bit in a while, but I just just talking about basics. Now, if you look at this Harvard Atlas of Economic Complexity, which kind of gauges countries' export diversity, African nations fare rather poorly. In fact, if you look at the bottom 10, 9 are out of Africa. So basically what that means is that African nations are just exporting raw materials. That's it. So how do this has been going on for so long. Mona, let me start with you. How do you kind of change it?
Very difficult question. I think if it were easy, we would have done it. So indeed, the thing about Africa is, I mean, I was talking about trade before and how it opens markets. Africa has preferential access to markets abroad through AGOA, through GSP, through other, and it was not able to take advantage of it because market access is only one thing. You also need behind-the-border issues to be working. You need infrastructure. You need investment climate that's working. You need good institutions. You need, Africa has a lot of state-owned enterprises that displace the private sector. There is corruption. It's not the only continent that has high corruption, but it does have high corruption, and that changes a lot of things. So I think we need to start building the institutions, improving the investment climate, allowing the private sector to thrive instead of suffocating the private sector. And then the private sector also needs education, good talent, and then transport and energy. All of these things will, are still not very well resolved. At the World Bank, we have a program to finance energy and provide energy to 300 million people in Africa. And these are the kinds of objectives we should set ourselves, because we know the problems in Africa. It's how do you set objectives to resolve the basic issues and then stick to them. And then you have the possibility to create regional value chains. So right now, Africa does not produce either oil and minerals or just basic commodities. But that's a bit caricaturistic because you do have, as I mentioned before, countries in Africa that are already industrializing, already moving up the value chain, already producing and exporting sophisticated products. So how do you basically create synergy around that and bring others into these value chains so that you increase the momentum of the growth of these regional value chains? And again, that could be pharmaceuticals, it could be sophisticated agribusiness, it could be digital services. So it's already happening in Africa, and it just needs to continue.
So if I may quickly move to Abir on that point, and in terms of how do you build the value chain, at least in trade, what would, let's say, if you had to ask governments to take action, what would you say they need to do?
I think there's a lot that they need to do. One thing is to really enable the local logistics players and the local manufacturing players, the private sector, and kind of get out of the way. There's a lot of trade barriers that need to be simplified, because you can say that I have a free trade agreement, but then are you actually, when you come to cross the border, how easy is that? How time consuming? I was just looking, and it actually takes about 92 hours for cross border in Africa, as compared to about 13 hours in OECD countries. We need to focus more and more, I think, on reducing costs. And the only way to do that is through many different projects. Infrastructure is the role of the government. And then, taking part in that through BOT, through many different aspects, can be the role of the private sector.
Thank you for that. We're running out of time, so Banji, I want to go back to you on AFCTA. Have you seen an impetus among government, and, policymakers, etc., to really get it off the ground now that, we have this trade turmoil happening?
Yeah, I think the answer to that is yes and no. Yes, in the sense that Africa has certainly come to the realization that, we need to solve our own problems. I'm not sure the world is going to solve our problems. And when we talk about beneficiation and all that, on the ground, these are things that we're doing. We are one of the investors in a company called Arise, where we own about 70%. Through Arise, we've turned the curtain industry in Benin, for example, from just primary products to making of garments, within a special economic zone. Some of those garments are sold, at the children's place and other places around the world. Similar thing in Gabon with the wood. Historically, the country just cuts the wood, exports it. Now we're making some of the world's best furnitures in the special economic zone. So when you see that, a lot of governments are waking up to the need for beneficiation. We're also the lead developers for Lobito Corridor, which again is going to be rail that connects, Angola, Zambia, DRC, and on the back of that, there's a lot of critical minerals industrialization that will happen there. So I think governments there are waking up to the need for that. But of course, I agree with you, a lot still needs to be done. Continental free trade has been an idea for some time. We need more action on the ground. So I agree with you on that point.
Unfortunately, we've run out of time right now. So thank you, all three of you. It was great. I think we could go on for a couple of hours. But we'll end there. And that concludes the sessions of this breakout. We hope you find all the discussions interesting and worthwhile.